The envelope hit the table with a quiet insult. A badge thought it could rewrite Bumpy Johnson's name. In that room, everyone felt it. Something was about to break. Slowly. The room didn't feel dangerous. That was the mistake. A desk. 2 chairs. Paper stacked neatly, like order itself had been rehearsed. The detective moved slowly, confident in the rhythm of authority. Badge visible. Voice measured. He believed calm belonged to him. Bumpy Johnson sat across from him, hands relaxed, eyes steady. He didn't scan the room, didn't fidget, didn't ask questions. Men like Bumpy didn't need to search for threats. They felt them arrive. The envelope slid forward, not slammed, not tossed, placed. A quiet insult. Inside were answers already decided, evidence that told a story too clean to be true, objects that had never been in Bumpy's hands, now claiming his fingerprints. A lie dressed up as procedure. The detective watched Bumpy's face, waiting for the reaction he'd been promised. Anger, fear, negotiation. Nothing came. Bumpy picked up the envelope, felt its weight. Not the paper, the intention. He knew this move, had seen it before, from men who confused position with power, men who thought respect could be manufactured by force and paperwork. "You sure this is how you want to start?" the detective said, almost casually. Bumpy looked at him then, not hard, not soft, present. That look did something to the room. It slowed it down, made the walls feel closer, made the detective aware. Suddenly, that silence could be heavier than shouting. Bumpy didn't deny the evidence, didn't defend himself, didn't reach for a lawyer's name or a street name. He simply placed the envelope back on the desk, aligning it carefully with the edge, like he respected the lie enough not to wrinkle it. "You done?" Bumpy asked. The question landed wrong. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't curious. It sounded like a man checking the time. The detective smiled. He thought that was weakness, thought the lack of protest meant surrender. In his world, resistance was loud. This was quiet. He mistook quiet for empty. What he didn't understand was that Bumpy Johnson never fought the trap. He studied the hand setting it. Outside that room, Harlem kept breathing. Shops opened. Men leaned in doorways. Women counted change. Life moved forward, unaware that a line had just been crossed, one that didn't bleed immediately, but never healed cleanly. Bumpy stood up, smooth, unrushed. "This gonna be your story," he said, nodding at the envelope. "Make sure you like how it ends." He walked out without another word. The detective sat alone with his evidence, suddenly unsure why the victory felt unfinished. The badge on his chest felt heavier now, like something had been borrowed and would need to be returned. Bumpy didn't look back. He never did, because when a man plants something dirty, Bumpy Johnson knew one thing for certain: it always grows where everyone can see it. Harlem didn't need an announcement. It felt the shift. Bumpy's name moved without sound, from barbershops to back rooms, from church steps to after-hours kitchens. No one repeated the details. They didn't have to. When Bumpy Johnson went quiet, Harlem listened harder. Men who owed him favors didn't rush to repay them. That was the discipline. No scrambling, no shows of force. Bumpy had taught them that noise attracts the wrong kind of attention. Power moved better when it moved unseen. On the streets, nothing changed. And that was the message. Dice still rolled. Music still spilled from open doors. Smiles stayed where they belonged. Harlem didn't look nervous. It looked patient, like it knew the difference between a storm and a passing cloud. Bumpy walked those blocks the same way he always had. Measured steps, clean suit, eyes forward. He nodded to shop owners, stopped for short conversations, listened more than he spoke. Every gesture said the same thing: "I'm still here." People noticed who didn't show up anymore. Certain men with badges stopped lingering too long. Squad cars rolled through quicker than usual. The street understood signs better than words. Inside Harlem, respect was a currency older than fear. Bumpy had built his name on that. He didn't demand loyalty. He earned it by being predictable, by never letting emotion outrun judgment. Someone asked him once, quietly, "You gonna let this stand?" Bumpy didn't answer right away. He watched a kid chase a loose ball across the street, waited until it was safe again. "Stand," he said. "It's already leaning." That was enough. The community didn't see him as a gangster fighting the law. They saw him as a man protecting balance. If the badge could lie about Bumpy Johnson, it could lie about anyone. That made this personal. Still, no violence, no threats, no grand speeches, just restraint. And restraint in Harlem meant confidence. Behind closed doors, pressure began to form, not from Bumpy's hands, but from his absence. Meetings postponed. Informants went quiet. Information slowed to a drip. The city didn't know why its gears weren't turning as smoothly, but Harlem did. Bumpy let the silence do the work. Because when a man truly controls the room, he doesn't need to raise his voice. He lets others realize they've been speaking too loudly for too long. And somewhere downtown, a detective started to feel it. Not danger, not yet, just the uncomfortable awareness that Harlem was watching him now, the same way it always watched Bumpy Johnson. Pressure doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it comes as a pause. The detective felt it first in the quiet places, calls that didn't come back, informants who suddenly remembered nothing, familiar faces that stopped lingering near precinct doors. The city still moved, but not in his direction. He told himself it was coincidence, that systems corrected themselves, that authority, once exercised, didn't need reassurance. He was wrong. Behind closed doors, the paperwork started to feel heavier. Questions came from people who hadn't asked them before. Small ones, careful ones, the kind designed to sound harmless while digging for weakness. Where'd this evidence come from? Who logged it first? Why now? Each question landed softly, and each one stayed. The detective leaned harder on the badge, straightened his back, reminded himself who wore the uniform. He had rules, procedures, a system built to protect its own. But systems don't like attention. Bumpy Johnson never made a call, never sent a message, never needed to. His power wasn't in orders, it was in influence. People adjusted their behavior around him the way water adjusts around stone. The detective felt eyes on him when he walked into rooms, not hostile, assessing, as if people were measuring the cost of standing too close. That kind of pressure doesn't bruise the skin, it bruises certainty. He went back over the evidence again, touched the items, read the reports. Everything was where it should be. Too perfect. He noticed that now. The cleanliness of the lie. For the first time, he imagined the court. Imagined the silence when questions slowed. Imagined a calm voice asking him to explain things he couldn't. Bumpy's voice, not raised, not threatening, just patient. That patience followed him. Into his sleep, into his reflections. It wasn't fear of retaliation that unsettled him. It was the sense that he'd misjudged the kind of man he was dealing with. Bumpy Johnson wasn't pushing back. He was making space, and space is dangerous. It gives truth room to stretch. By the time the detective realized the pressure wasn't coming from the streets, but from inside the system itself, it was already too late to pull back clean. Somewhere in Harlem, Bumpy sat at a table, listening, letting the city speak for him, knowing that men who plant lies eventually trip over them. The badge didn't feel powerful anymore. It felt exposed, and exposure, in a courtroom, is louder than any gunshot. The disrespect didn't whisper anymore. It stood in the open. The evidence was filed, logged, presented like fact, a lie with official ink. What had been done quietly was now visible, placed where truth was supposed to live. People saw it, and they waited. Bumpy Johnson walked into that awareness without changing his pace. Same calm, same posture. He didn't avoid eyes. He didn't seek them either. That balance unsettled people more than anger ever could. This wasn't just about him now. That was the mistake. When authority tried to humiliate Bumpy publicly, it wasn't attacking a man, it was testing a code Harlem lived by. Respect, fairness, boundaries. Men expected a reaction. Something sharp, something final. Violence always seemed easier to predict. Bumpy gave them none of it. He sat through the process without interruption. Let the words fall. Let the accusation hang in the air long enough for everyone to smell how wrong it was. His silence wasn't empty. It was deliberate. Every second stretched the moment tighter. Across the room, the detective watched. He had imagined this part differently, had expected confrontation, a slip, a raised voice he could point to and say, "There, that's who he really is." Instead, he saw control. Bumpy didn't look trapped. He looked patient. That patience did something dangerous. It shifted attention. People stopped watching the accused. They started watching the accuser. The way the detective avoided certain details, the way his answers came too quickly. Public disrespect cuts both ways. When it's earned, it humiliates. When it's forced, it exposes. Bumpy leaned back slightly, not defiant, comfortable, like a man waiting for a clock to catch up to him. This was the moment everyone remembered later, not because of shouting, not because of violence, but because restraint, displayed in public, becomes undeniable power, and power, once seen, can't be unseen. The room didn't belong to the badge anymore. It hadn't noticed when it changed hands. The room felt smaller than before, not crowded, contained. Every sound carried weight now. Papers turning, chairs shifting, breaths measured more carefully than usual. This wasn't tension built on fear. It was tension built on inevitability. The detective took the stand knowing the floor beneath him was no longer solid. He had worn confidence like a shield once. Now it fit poorly. His words came out rehearsed, but the pauses between them told a different story. Bumpy Johnson sat still, not rigid, not relaxed, balanced. He didn't stare the detective down, didn't need to. He let the questions do the work, each one simple, each one clean. They weren't accusations, they were invitations to explain, to clarify, to commit. The truth doesn't panic, lies do. Details started to tangle, timelines bent. The neat order the detective had created began to unravel under its own precision. He corrected himself once, then twice. Each correction pulled more attention toward him. Someone coughed in the back. Someone shifted forward. The detective realized too late that this wasn't a fight. It was an exposure. No threats. No pressure from Bumpy's side. Just patience and structure. Then came the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. A question hung in the air longer than expected. The detective looked down. Looked up. The room waited with him. His voice changed when he spoke again. It wasn't defiant. It wasn't professional. It was tired. He admitted it slowly, like he hoped the pace might soften the impact. Evidence placed where it didn't belong. A decision made to force a result. A line crossed because he believed no one would challenge it. The confession didn't explode. It settled. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. Bumpy didn't react. No nod. No smile. No satisfaction. Victory, when you understand power, doesn't require acknowledgement. The detective's shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in relief. The lie was heavier than the truth ever was. In that moment, the courtroom understood something it hadn't before. This wasn't about crime. It was about restraint, and restraint had won. The confession should have ended it, on paper. It did, but moments like this don't disappear when the room empties. They linger. They follow people out into hallways and into memory. They decide how a story gets told long after the facts stop moving. The detective didn't leave with the others. He waited. Bumpy Johnson stood slowly, adjusting his jacket the way he always did. No rush, no ceremony. Men stepped aside without thinking about it. Respect moved ahead of him, clearing space. The detective approached carefully, not as an officer, not as authority, just a man whose shield had failed him. "I was wrong," he said. No badge in his hand now, no posture, just words. He hesitated, then said what he hadn't planned to say. "I need you to forgive me." The room held its breath again. Forgiveness isn't weakness, not in Harlem. It's judgment. It's deciding what deserves to follow you and what doesn't. Bumpy understood that better than most. He studied the man in front of him, not with anger, with clarity. He saw fear, yes, but also something rarer, accountability. Bumpy spoke quietly, so quietly that people leaned in without realizing it. "You already paid," he said. "Don't make it cost you more than it should." No lecture, no warning, no threat. Just a line drawn, clean and final. That decision echoed louder than any retaliation could have. It told Harlem something important. Power wasn't about destruction. It was about control, about knowing when enough was enough. The detective nodded, eyes lowered. He left smaller than he'd arrived, but lighter. The weight he'd tried to place on someone else now belonged fully to him. Bumpy walked out into Harlem the same way he always had. Nothing changed on the surface, and everything changed underneath. People remembered this moment, not because a detective fell, but because a man with every reason to strike back chose restraint instead. That choice became part of Bumpy Johnson's code, a quiet legacy passed hand to hand, story to story. In Harlem, they didn't call it mercy, they called it authority. And long after the paperwork yellowed and names faded, one thing remained clear: Bumpy Johnson didn't need violence to win. He needed time.